Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Living Generationally podcast. I'm your host, Brianna Laurie, and I'm so excited that you have joined me for another podcast episode. And I hope you're here to stay to the end. It's a good one today. I'm actually really super duper excited to talk about this topic because it's something that the Lord has been kind of bringing up in my own heart and something I've been wrestling with and growing in. Yeah. But before we get into that topic, I just want to share a little bit about what living generationally is. Living generationally is where we get the opportunity to explore how our everyday choices ripple through our lives and the lives of those who come after us. This is where purpose begins, where gratitude grows, and where accountability leads to legacy. And one day, I hope all of you can say that together, that we can all say that together, that living generationally is an opportunity for us to grow in gratitude and where accountability leads to legacy, where purpose begins, where gratitude grows, and where accountability leads to legacy. And I hope that becomes a part of, not, it doesn't have to be your life slogan, but just something that you think about and kind of meditate on, and just think about and, see how that, like, our everyday actions, they, they matter. They really do. And sometimes I forget that. Going through the mundane of life, it's easy to be like, oh, this is boring, and oh, I'm not making no impact. I'm just here, wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And it's that reminder, like, no, like, these mundane moments are the moments where we're being truly transformed and where the Lord is really working in our lives. Yes, the big moments matter, but the mundane moments, though it may be slow at times, and sometimes stretching, those are the moments where we truly get an opportunity to walk with the Lord and to truly journey with Him through the ups and downs of life. Yeah, and there wasn't a podcast episode last week. You probably recognize that. I was sick and I was going to film, but I was like, no, I can't. I don't want to push. I just need to rest, and I decided to rest. So I'm glad I chose to do that. And yeah, and also if you're new here and this is your first time listening to the Living Generationally podcast, I really enjoy if you would join this community and share this podcast with others as well too. It also helps the podcast to grow. And if you are kind enough to leave a comment or a rating or review, I really would appreciate that, as it helps the podcast to grow and to get into the hands of more people, so we can all have these conversations of how our everyday choices ripple through our lives and how there's purpose in those moments, and that is an opportunity to grow in gratitude and to be accountable to the actions that we have in our daily life, and to see how we can steward each moment for the Lord. Yeah, let's join this community. And if you're watching on YouTube, I also film this podcast on YouTube, so you can go on Spotify, Apple, to listen to the podcast and leave a comment, rating, or review. Or if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to the podcast and you can watch it on video. We're on video. You can go back and look at the podcast episodes. Yeah, if you would like to do that. But let's actually get into today's podcast episode, which is truly the meat of the podcast and truly why you clicked on it, right? As you saw the title, you're probably like, I'm curious what this random girl has to say about this topic. So something that I've been thinking about is this idea of being freed from the world's standards. And also I've been with that idea as well too. I've also been thinking about what is the true meaning of freedom and liberty. Because sometimes we hear these words kind of thrown around, and I think we have a misunderstanding of what true freedom is and true liberty is. And we can kind of see that within our culture, that I feel like our culture paints this narrative of what freedom and liberty is. And it often leads to many consequences long term that we don't often think about. We kind of think about the short term pleasures and the temporary of what I want. And we don't think about the long term of our choices and actions of what we would deem as true freedom and liberty in that moment, and not thinking of how that's not only going to impact our lives in the future, but the lives of those to come after us, our children, their grandchildren, or even our communities and those around us. And I think it's important that we have this conversation, because if we don't, we kind of allow the world to dictate what true freedom is and what true liberty looks like, and we veer off the path of what God says. And we don't want to do that, because when we do that, there's no clear direction, there's no guidance, there's confusion, and we don't serve a God who confuses his people. We serve a God who provides clarity. But are we willing to dive into that clarity of, and which is found in his word, or we're going to continue just allowing the world to blindly lead us and to pour lies and half truths? And I think it's important that we talk about this. Um, yeah, so as I've been kind of trying to wean myself off of um, constantly being on YouTube, because I'm not on social media, but the biggest thing I really struggle with is constantly being on YouTube or even constantly listening to something. I'm learning to wean myself off of that and just truly be in the moment of life, because I want to be present and I want to be intentional with my time and what I'm doing. And not to say that the podcast you're listening to or the YouTube videos you're watching or I'm necessarily watching are bad, but constantly having that noise and constantly having our brain being distracted um, doesn't give us the opportunity to actually be creative, because often creativity comes out of a state of being bored, or your mind having a place to rest and just kind of function on its own without constantly having these dopamine hits or these moments of great distraction. And as I've been trying to wean myself off of it, I realized how hard it is, how I am addicted to those dopamine hits. I'm addicted to those distractions because they distract me from the thoughts, the deep thoughts that that I have, that I kind of don't want to think about. They distract me maybe from the problems that I know that I'm maybe struggling with, but I'm unwilling to go through it because it's a bit uncomfortable. And it's like, I actually don't want to go to those places that are uncomfortable, but I know I want to grow and I want to live a life of legacy and to be intentional with how I steward every day, and to be intentional in having a vision and mission and goal for life, and that looks different. Maybe in each season of life, but having an overall vision and mission is really important. But I think constantly being distracted, I get distracted from those missions and visions that the Lord has placed before me and on my life. Um, and I began to realize that, man, like I truly need the Lord's help in this. I tried to do it in my own strength, but I couldn't. And the more and more I tried to wean off of this, and I'm trying to not be on YouTube, I'm realizing, man, there's an addiction here. There truly is. And what I thought was freedom, the freedom to constantly be on YouTube, or the freedom to constantly be entertained by something, actually led to more sadness and more disconnection and a greater sense of loss, um, and also just fogginess, having this constant distraction, and my brain having to adjust and readjust, and my nervous system and all the dysregulation, all that stuff. It's like, it is hard to constantly keep going back and forth between that and trying to create a meaningful life as well too. And I began to realize that what I thought was freedom, the freedom to indulge in this, even though it is good, can be considered good with the good content, it's actually not true freedom. It's actually leading to um, a sense of need and bondage. And I know that may be too deep of a language to think of, but I think we need to go there. I truly think we do, because when we handle these situations lightly, we end up viewing it lightly and not willing to take drastic measures to make those changes in our lives, to help us to be more aware and present, to help us truly take accountability of our time and our actions and what the Lord is wanting to do in our life. And yeah, and I want you to think about that as well too. What are the freedoms in your life that you thought that are could be good? You may have some bad things, you know that they're bad, but what are the things in your life that could be good, but you're overindulging in, and it's actually not leading to the freedom, like it's not leading to the results that you're expecting when you first started to buy into that freedom, or you first started to give into that, to those freedoms. I want you to think about that. Even though it may be uncomfortable for you to do that, it was uncomfortable for me, but it led to this place where of humility and recognizing, okay, Lord, I need some help here. And this also led to deeper thought as I've been going to scripture and kind of reading scripture more, kind of wanting to indulge freely in that, and wanting to truly get to know more about who Jesus is. I see that in scripture there's we have the freedom as believers, but we have freedom as believers, but there's constraints to that freedom. And I believe that true freedom has constraints. Like there's no such thing as freedom without constraints. And that sounds very tricky in our modern minds, because we think that freedom is being liberated for all the things that is oppressing us. And we see that with the women's liberation movement, and look where that has gotten us now. And I think it one has to truly think about that, like that true freedom is not without constraints. That true freedom has constraints, and no one can be truly free if there were no constraints to guide that freedom. Because true freedom allows you to know what is morally good, and not just good for you, but good for the majority of others as well too, and how that impacts not only your life but others as well too. And I think we live in a culture where we've taken advantage of the word freedom and kind of used it and abused it to our own good and pleasures, and kind of have forsaken how that would affect um, those around us and those to come. Think about, like I mentioned just a little bit before, the women's liberation movement. Look where we are today with abortion um, and the sexual revolution, and just look at families, look at marriage, look at children, look at the state of our world today. And I know more of Western culture because that's where I live in the U.S. So it's like, look at us. Like, is that what true freedom and liberty is? Like, are we liking the results of what we thought was true freedom and liberty? I can attest that I don't. Like, am I'm a product of a broken family, and that has its own thing. But it's like many men and women buy into the lies of the world what true freedom is, and it leads to a lot of brokenness that people don't really think about. And I and that's been like bugging me. Like it's been something that it has been really heavy on my mind lately, and kind of why I wanted to share more about it. And this is also kind of going back to I was thinking, as I was thinking about freedom and thinking about this topic, I also thought about like the Declaration of Independence, which states that all men are endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And at face value, we can just take this like, oh, like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I can pursue this to my own end and to my own pleasures. But I I was listening to a video. I think I forgot. I think it was by Hillsdale College, and it was posted on the 4th of July, and um it was, yes. So the video was posted by Hillsdale College on July 4th, and it was kind of like a skit of Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence, and including like including this statement, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, but and I think, I don't know if it was in this video or I watched another video, but it talked about the common misconception that we can have about what this means, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because we can instantly read this and think that this is without constraint, that this is to the pursuit of my own desires, without thinking about anyone. And I forgot. I don't know. I gotta link the video down below, because or in the podcast show notes or in the YouTube description, because it was so good. And that it had mentioned that that true freedom isn't without constraints, and that Thomas Jefferson didn't have that in mind when he was writing the Declaration of Independence. He understood that in order for a majority of people to have these unalienable rights or inalienable rights, that it also required a sense of constraint, because that is only where true liberty, life, and pursuit of happiness can actually flourish and thrive for a majority of people. Because if we all chose our version of what life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness looks like, it would be to the dismay and a disvaluing of others. And that really struck a chord in me, because I'm like, whoa, that is so true. And Thomas Jefferson is pointing here to morality, that within these rights that we have, there's a moral goodness that is a driving force behind life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, that actually gives value to those things. Without morality and the moral goodness of those things cannot ultimately exist. So now we live in a culture which has twisted the true meaning of freedom and liberty, um, and even systems. And now we have a culture that is trying to get back to what this truly means. And we find ourselves stuck because we haven't had this model to us, or maybe we weren't raised in homes that had the foundations that we have within Scripture to guide and lead us in our lives. And I think yeah, that had me thinking about also like freedom from the world standards, and how we have to live, and the things that we think we need in order to live, and how Scripture frees us from those things, that we don't need the riches of this world to be truly satisfied. We can um, have freedom knowing that, like, yes, it's not wrong to have goals and to work hard. That it is beautiful, and I believe the Lord actually encourages that, obviously. But there's freedom to know that all our needs are taken care of by the Lord. Now He is our provider, and we can trust in that. And one of the ways He provides is through our hard work. But we can also recognize that, like, there doesn't need to be worry, that we are free from those cares of the world, because we know we serve a God who is in control, who's above all things and in all things. And that is really comforting to me as I'm kind of pivoting to this part of freedom, the freedom to not be so focused and worrisome and fixated on the things that the world is saying that I need in order to be satisfied, or the metrics that the world has, because those metrics often often fail, and they don't offer the true freedom that we're looking to have, that only Christ can offer us. And and yeah, and I think also from reading scripture, I've gotten more and more of this clear understanding that as believers, like I mentioned before, that we have freedoms, but just because we have the freedom to do something doesn't mean we should do it or it's profitable for us to do it. Um, I think within our world, we have the freedom to eat whatever we want, and but we also know that comes at a cost. Like a lot of the food, like this is another passion of mine, but a lot of our food system is corrupt and is led by money grabbers and people who are after a profit rather than actually after the healing and the wellness of others. And one may say that their freedom to indulge in anything that they want, um, that's their right, that's their freedom, that's their liberty to do that. But is that truly freedom, in its fullest sense, that that person is not um, in bondage to that thing, or enslaved to their gut, to their stomach, or to a lot of these um, or like a lot of like not so good ingredients that's being put in food today. Um, yeah, and also was thinking that, like, yeah, overindulgence of freedom can become bondage. Um, that what we think is good can ultimately end in our harm, especially if we aren't using wisdom. And that's the beauty of walking with the Lord, is that we can trust that He has our best interests in mind. And I had this recollection. I'm having this thought now, of when I was just sitting before the Lord, or I think I was doing something, and I don't know, or maybe I was sitting, I don't know, I forgot. But I had this thought that, like, um, the Lord knows what is best for us, and what we deem as true freedom often isn't the freedom that we're looking for. So we can rest in assurance that what He says in His Word is the true freedom that our souls is truly longing for. And we even, like, for example, this is another example, like technology, and is a good thing, but we are overindulging in technology, and people are more disconnected than ever. And we see that this so-called freedom that we have also has this sword, where now we're trying to get back to community, we're trying to get back to deeper connections. And not to say all technology, I'm not here to advocate and say all technology is bad. I just think that we need to have these conversations on what is true freedom, and what are some of the constraints and restrictions that we need to have to actually allow us to flourish in the freedom that the Lord has called us according to His Word, not according to world standards, or according to how we feel in the current moment. Because the freedoms that we indulge in the current moment may feel good, but they may not be the lasting results that we want to leave behind to the next generation. And I think that is to that is something that we need to think about and have a conversation on, and I hope that this is something that you can think on as well too, um, and and realize that there's freedom, and that we don't need, and although, like, this is a narrow way, like, these this freedom with constraints and following scripture, this is the narrow way, and we have to be willing to walk that narrow path. And it's going to look different, it's going to be uncomfortable, but this is where true life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness can actually be truly enjoyed, because we realize that ultimate happiness and ultimate life and ultimate liberty isn't found in our current desires that we're feeling in a moment, or what the world is telling us that we need to indulge in, or to do. But we know that true freedom is found in an eternal God, and that eternal God knows what is best for us now. And um, when we throughout all eternity. He knows what is best for us. Yeah, but yeah, that is kind of what I wanted to share, and I don't really think I have anything else. But this can be a continued conversation, and I hope it is like the rest of the podcast episodes as I continue to share what I'm learning and growing in, and how I'm applying living generationally to my life and its principles, because there's no perfect picture of what living generationally looks like. It's just more of how we can apply those principles to our life and our specific circumstances and situations, and how we can lead with purpose, gratitude, and accountability, and have that be some foundation as to how we live our lives, and how we can live and leave an impact on our families' lives, but also the lives of our community. And with that, that is the end of today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a like if you're on YouTube, or and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also a comment, rating, or review on Spotify or Apple. That helps this podcast to grow. And yeah, and a question I have for you is, what are kind of what I shared in the beginning? What are some freedoms that you thought was actually a freedom, but is actually leading to the results that you don't like? That isn't actually as profitable as you thought it would be. Um, yeah, live with legacy leading to the future. And this is where purpose begins, where gratitude grows, and where accountability leads to legacy. You can also subscribe to my Substack. I know this is like last, but you can subscribe to my Substack. I'll be writing, doing some blogs there, and just kind of some other thought pieces that I have. And yeah, we'd love to have you over there as well too. Bye.